What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports 200 Show. And in today's episode, I have special guest Griffin from the YWC Football Talk Podcast. How you doing today, Griffin?
I'm doing good, man. We're in the swing of things with free agency. Draft's right around the corner. And just enjoying it one day at a time. There's some other news going on in the NFL, too. And, just kind of like getting past the whole free agency, starting to look ahead towards the draft.
Yeah, we're just a little bit over a week away from free agency. The league tampering was last Monday and officially started Wednesday. There's been already so many moves, far more moves than I would say most people expected before it even actually started. And, we're going to be talking about NFL free agency on this episode. And, you've been on the show multiple times. And, people who have seen you on the show know that you're a huge Patriots fan. So we're going to go ahead and start the show off with the Patriots spending like over $100 million. Let's start off with the Hunter Henry, deal. It was 3 years for $37.5. Personally, I really like them signing Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. I believe it was the on ESPN or something like that. They used the two tight end personnel the least amount in the NFL this past season. And Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith could be, kind of like how Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski used to be. But Hunter Henry is a top 7 tight end, and Jonnu Smith. You're getting two very, very good tight ends there. Hunter Henry, to me, that would be an A-plus signing there for New England.
Here's the thing, though. When we got Jonnu Smith, that was like right when the legal tampering opened up, about 45 minutes after that we found out about that. But it was Tuesday morning. I was at work, and I'm just scrolling on Twitter and stuff, and I see the Hunter Henry thing. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds where going back to it, when we got Smith, I was happy. I was like, okay, cool. We got Jonnu Smith. If Hunter Henry decides to sign elsewhere, I'm fine. We got one. Like, out of those two tight ends, I wanted either one on my team. The fact that we got both is just like it's just the icing on top. It's the cherry on the sundae, if you will. They are going to bring in a couple of sets. It is Boston Tea Party Part 2. I just don't think it's going to be the production levels. I'm not expecting what Gronkowski and Hernandez did. I don't think ever can be reduplicated. I would look at more kind of like what we saw from Gronk and Martellus Bennett back in like 2016-ish, like around that time. I can remember off the top of my head how long Bennett was a Patriot for. But just that level of production, because Gronk and Hernandez came in and just shot the world. Meanwhile, with Smith and Henry, you got to look at it too, is they're building this offense to revolve around Cam. That's as soon as the Cam signing happened and these signings happened, that's how I looked at it, because Cam's blanket in Carolina was Greg Olsen. When he had his best years, Greg Olsen was his number one target. So that's why these signings make complete sense. So they're trying to revitalize what they saw from Cam at his peak in Carolina, but at the same time too, put that little Patriot twist on it, or that little Patriots, I'm going to do it with my hands, the little spice, if you will, the little Bill Belichick flair.
So, Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, to me, both those signings were really good. Jonnu Smith was 1 year more. It was 4 for $50. Yeah. You mentioned, Martellus Bennett and Rob Gronkowski, also with Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski as well, going back to that two tight end set again. But which signing between Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith do you like more?
Hunter Henry, just because he's the more proven tight end. Not saying anything bad with Jonnu Smith. It's just with Jonnu Smith, I felt like he didn't get the exact production levels that he wanted to. His real chances to shine in Tennessee. Like, he had his moments, but he wasn't like anything big. And like, now he can come to New England, kind of prove, hey, he can be put in anywhere. He can even be put in the run game too in a little bit. He's going to be good for blocking and catching. But with Hunter Henry, though, he is the guy who's coming in proven. He was great with Phillip Rivers. He was great with Justin Herbert. It's just a matter now of can he stay healthy, because obviously I believe it was 2019. He didn't play the entire season, and he had a torn ACL. But just a little quick advisory for those of you wondering for fantasy, it's going to be very wish-wash. So when coming to drafting Patriot players for fantasy football this upcoming season, proceed with caution. That's all I got to say, because I think it's going to be one game you see one guy shine, one game it's another guy gets shine. Like, that's why I went more with the Gronkowski-Bennett comparison to Gronk Hernandez, because when it was Gronk Hernandez, it would be those two lighting it up at the same time, and that's what was so successful for those teams in the 3 seasons that they worked together.
I think those pairings with the Patriots are going to be really, really, helpful in the offense. And what you said with Cam Newton, with Greg Olsen, that's a very, very good point. Take away Olsen, Cam Newton was not nearly as good of a quarterback as people think. And, the Patriots did, re-sign Cam Newton to a 1-year deal as well. What were your thoughts on the Patriots re-signing Newton to a 1-year deal?
you know what, for the money that they signed him to, it's a 5-year deal. It's not a 5-year deal. It's $5 million, $9 million of its performance incentive, which hopefully kind of lights a fire underneath him to kind of get him to perform, get him to top expectations. Meanwhile, look, because if you look at all the deals, Tyrod Taylor, Jameis Winston, Cam Newton all got the same contracts, because more than likely all three will probably start at some point this year. We'll see what happens with the Houston Texans with Deshaun Watson. But with Cam, look, at first when I saw the signing, I was kind of like, but then when I saw the financials on it, I felt a lot better about it, because paying him $14 million wasn't good. But then when you see the breakdowns of the contract and just showing how much it could be either into a signing bonus or into performance incentives, meaning, look, if Cam can go out there and get this team to the playoffs and even further, it just helps him. But for $5 million, it's a steal for a quarterback. You're not going to get quarterbacks in the NFL for much cheaper than that, especially considering some of the deals, like, for example, Dak Prescott signed 2 weeks ago.
At first, with Cam Newton, I really don't understand him at all. When you've been on the show, we've talked multiple times, the possibility of the Patriots, trading for Jimmy Garoppolo, or if, the 49ers were to release him, maybe the Patriots would go after Garoppolo. But, after looking at the money, Tyrod Taylor got, up to $12.5 million for a 1-year deal. I mean, I would figure, he's going to start some at some point especially with Deshaun Watson probably not going to play a snap for the Houston Texans. But Tyrod Taylor only started, I believe, 1 game, maybe 2 games last season for the Chargers, and he's getting $12.5. I mean, Cam Newton going into the Patriots last season, I thought he was going to be good. He was not nearly as good as what I thought, but, you had to go with, coronavirus, we had that. He was injuries. First year with the system, he was signed just a month or so before the season started. And, I mean, the thing with me, though, with the Patriots, before he signed with the Patriots, he was 0-8 his last 8 starts with Carolina. And I know that was something I kind of brought out. Like, I think he'll be good with the Patriots, but I don't think he's quite as good as some people say. I think, with the offensive talent they have now, he's definitely capable of having a good season. I don't think he'll ever have an MVP season, but I could definitely see Newton maybe in this New England team to the New England team to the playoffs, and possibly maybe even win the division.
I don't think they're winning division. To me, it's still Buffalo's division, especially if you look at the moves that Brandon Beane made. He didn't improve his team in any sense, but he brought back the core players that they needed to bring back, like the fact they got Matt Milano on a hometown discount, Darrell Williams, John Feliciano. They're really building something there in Buffalo. So Buffalo right now is the kings of the AFC East, as far as I'm concerned. Meanwhile, with the Patriots, they're going to fall somewhere in that 5 to 10 range, in my opinion, where you have them, probably Pittsburgh in the mix, the Titans, the Dolphins, probably the Chargers, like in that mix right there, where I think they're going to be a wild card team unless something bad happens to Buffalo, where we get Mitch Trubisky starting for them. But with New England, look, I'm not saying I expect 2015 Cam to come out. When I was saying, like, going back to what I said earlier, look, if Cam could come out there and have an improved offseason, and here's the other part too that a lot of people are realizing, this team's defense was just, if you look at who they were starting guys who were practice squad. They were starting guys who were rookies. You don't throw them in starting situations. You play situational football with those guys. You play maybe second down football with those guys or special teams. Meanwhile, they were throwing them out there to start. Now, with the returns of guys like Kyle Van Noy resigning, Dante Hightower coming back, adding Henry Anderson, adding Devon Godchuk, adding Jalen Mills in the backfield, who's going to fill in for Patrick Chung, who just retired. The defense is going to carry a lot more and probably lead the team to a couple more wins they didn't get last year. Because if you look at a lot of those games last year, they got shredded. And you saw just in the proof, even in games they won too, win or lose, there was a lot of big plays they gave up. And I think that a lot of those will be significantly less this year. So with their defense, that's another thing to look onto too. So if Cam messes up, the defense can bail them out. They're trying to play that old 2000 style football that worked for them so well. Because if you go back to the early days of the Patriots dynasty 1.0, I like to call it, the defense ran the show. And Brady was good, but the defense was fantastic back in those days with like guys like Mike Vrabel, Teddy Bruschi, Rodney Harrison, Richard Seymour. The list goes on and on.
And you mentioned something about the defense that I completely agree with. I mean, their defense, they had some players opt out of the season, like Patrick Chung and, different players like that. For instance, Kyle Duggar, he was a second-round pick. Came from Lenoir-Rhyne. That is, I'm going to be honest, I've never even heard of that school before he was drafted, when people were talking about him. No preseason, he starts playing Lenoir-Rhyne, the NFL. You have no preseason, limited practice, with the coronavirus and everything. and they still end up shutting out the Chargers 45-0. Like I think like the Patriots defense is going to be really, really much improved. You mentioned Kyle Benoit, and I think that's an amazing re-sign there. He played one season with the Dolphins, and for whatever reason gets cut. I know they saved quite a bit of money. He was a team captain there, and I think their defense will be much improved. We've already kind of talked a little bit about their offensive moves. With Newton, Jonnu Smith, and Hunter Henry, and they also signed Nelson Aguilar. What were your thoughts on them signing Nelson Aguilar?
Nelson Aguilar, I liked it for the first year just because they put a lot of money into next year. It's just if we get 2019 Aguilar, it's going to be in trouble. So it's really up to him how he plays. Because if next year, say for example, if they were to cut or trade him, his dead cap hits at $10 million. That's something you like to see. But he can be versatile. He's going to be that. I looked at a bunch of his, I saw some of his highlights recently, just studying some film. He's a versatile receiver. He can get downfield and just run quick slants. Him and Kendrick Bourne are both being brought in. Obviously, it's not the big fish in the pond. Like, as you saw, many of the big receivers have either re-signed with their teams or gone on to new teams. But guys like Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne are going to be brought in to simply be not a wide receiver one, but like 1 and 1A kind of thing. And also to make Jacoby Myers more of a slot guy, especially because we don't know the status of Julian Edelman. Meanwhile, I feel like it gives a chance to Jacoby to shine in his true role where it's, look, you're not expecting him to be a wide receiver one. So if he puts up the same numbers as last year, he looks just as good doing it, and there's not pressure on him because everyone's expecting him to go out there and play like a wide receiver one. Meanwhile, with Kendrick Bourne, like yesterday came out that when he went to the Patriots facility, like Bill had his eye on him. That's the thing with Kyle Duggar too. Like a lot of people see like all these like Lenora, I forget what the name of the school is, but I know it's in North Carolina. But you can see these players that he wants. Bill is building his team. He's building it with the guys that he wants. Hunter Henry, for example, someone he scouted since high school. Matthew Judon's another player. He's great too because he can play on all sides of the ball. He can either play on the right side or the left side of the line. He's going to be a great presence coming off the edge. I'm excited to see him. But just back to the receivers quickly. Look, I'm not expecting like Tyreek Hill or Stephon Diggs numbers out of them. But look, they're going to be guys that can go downfield and make plays. And that's something we lacked terribly last year considering it was, for the most part, like I said, Myers, Harry, and then you had Demir Bird, and even Isaiah Zuber coming from the practice squad having to make a play here and there. So the fact that Bourne and Aguilar are here, they're going to make plays. They're going to be versatile, and they get the ball. They run a couple quick slant routes. They're gone.
Yeah, you mentioned like Belichick has those guys. We've talked about Kyle Duggar being at the Lenore Ryan. I'm actually a big Marshall fan, and it seems like every single time a Marshall player is drafted or signed, it's majority. He goes to the Patriots. For instance, last year, they drafted Justin Horvizer, which still to this day, I have no idea why they selected him.
He was cut this afternoon.
I did not know that, but I
released around like 3 hours ago.
I mean, you look at him, Troy Brown years ago. I mean, Randy Moss. They've had so many people. Troy Brown was a 3-time Super Bowl winner. Aaron Dobson, the second round pick years ago. And it's just kind of weird, The Patriots, to me, and Belichick, it seems like they find talent better than anybody else. And not even taking the Brady example. I mean, they find like a undrafted free agent. They can make a Pro Bowler. Belichick on the Patriots scouting is just phenomenal. The way they find these talented guys from absolutely nowhere, and then they make them into absolute stars.
Perfect example, returning on a hometown discount, center David Andrews. A lot of people, Patriot fans, were ready to lose. There was reports that came out late Wednesday saying that more than likely he's not coming back. They signed Ted Karras 1 year, $4 million just to have a center. And then David Andrews last Thursday night decided to come out and say, I'm not leaving, and he's staying. And he is a guy who I think is a Patriot lifer. He was an undrafted rookie out of Georgia in 2015 and is a team captain, is a fantastic center. He works well with the quarterback. He worked well with Brady. He's worked well with Cam last year. Obviously, he had the blood clot issue in 2019, so he couldn't play. But he's a leader on and off the field. And that's something I love to preach, is that for as much on-field chemistry you can have, off-field chemistry is what truly can make a team great.
Yeah, this season, I mean, going before free agency started, it was really interesting to see what the Patriots want to do with the draft. I mean, now after free agency, it's going to be so interesting with the draft now because, I mean, they fill lots of their holes. There was, if Kyle Pitts was there at 15, if he dropped. I mean, obviously that's not going to happen now, with Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. So there's lots of possibilities for the Patriots, and they're definitely going to be the most interesting team this season, in my opinion. And, it was a couple of days ago. We've talked about wide receivers a lot. Kenny Golladay signed with the New York Giants, for 4 years, $72 million. To me, I'm a big Bengal fan, and, the Bengals were in it for a little bit. Realistically, 4 for 72, that's I believe $18 million a season. I honestly I know most Bengal fans and most people, said that was too much. Honestly, I would have considered offering that deal. Because to me, Kenny Golladay is 100% one of the most underrated receivers in the NFL. I think he's a top 12 wide receiver. I know he was hurt, most of this past season. But you look at the year prior, he's had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He led the league in receiving touchdowns with David Blau, who was an undrafted free agent from Purdue, and Jeff Driscoll, who is both those guys are really, really bad quarterbacks, and led the league in receiving touchdowns with those guys. And I think he's going to be Golladay. He would have been a nice pairing with Higgins and Taylor Boyd. But Golladay, to me, I think that's an amazing signing by the Giants. I know some people say overpay, but by the time his contract's up, that may be considered a steal, because when Tyler Boyd was signed several years ago by the Bengals, he's getting around $12 million now. You look at players who are Corey Davis with the Jets, he's making around $13 million. So by the time his contract ends, I actually think this Kenny Golladay deal might actually be pretty good for the Giants.
The thing with the Golladay contract is, look, he wanted his money. He came out and publicly said he wanted to get $18 million a year. There weren't a lot of teams that were going to offer to him. Dave Gettleman came in and offered him. The Giants are obviously a team who they don't need receiving, but they just need healthy receivers. If you look at this right now, they obviously signed a Dory Jackson too. They gave out $96 million in guaranteed between two players, which you're playing a really risky game if you're Dave Gettleman. You're putting your job on the line if you're doing that. I know that could be a very controversial take, but it falls under the pressure of Daniel Jones right now. They have to go out and get an offensive lineman in the draft. There are some great ones in the first round. There's 3 guys who come to mind who they could probably, and at least 2 of them I could see them getting at 11. But it comes to Daniel Jones now. That's all I have to say. Golladay can do what he wants. If Daniel Jones' ball security doesn't improve, and also I feel like a lot of people are thinking, he's going to have look at last year, Diggs and Allen. I'm like, I don't know if Daniel Jones is going to have this giant leap. And for example, if you look at the NFC East, obviously it's a mediocre division. Philadelphia obviously sucks. The Dallas Cowboys offense is going to be electric this year if they go and all stay healthy, and Zeke can, same thing too, have proper ball security. The football team is a great defense. The Giants are kind of that weird misfit team where it's look, they got some pieces, they got a great defense. I believe in Patrick Graham, very good defensive coordinator. He's someone who, after the 2019 season, could have potentially gotten a head coaching job, but decided to take the DC job with the Giants to really prove it that he didn't. Because when he was in Miami, it was obviously Brian Flores doing a lot of the defensive play calling. But back to the signing, it could be great for him, but you could have a great year and still go 6-10 or 7-9 this year. I could honestly see the Giants doing that, because even still, I said, even with the signing, I still think the Giants are a year away from making noise unless they have to have everything go right. Because if you look at the whole controversy from last year where the Giants missed the playoffs because the Eagles decided to just basically shut the season down against Washington on Sunday Night Football, the Giants shot themselves in the foot earlier when they played the Eagles on Thursday Night Football and lost. The infamous Jones fumble. Or not fumble, the infamous Jones self-trip. There was other games, too, where the Giants could have won and they lost. So the Giants really were their own worst enemy. And it's the same thing this year. They could be their own best friend or they could be their own worst enemy. That's as simple as I'm going to say it.
Yeah, the inconsistency with Daniel Jones, he's going to be a major factor if they win or not. And something to keep in mind, not necessarily fumble losses, but he has more fumbles than he has touchdowns. And interceptions than he has touchdowns in his career. PFF, they posted something several days ago, the New York Giants offense is going to be lit. Daniel Jones, I don't think it's that huge of a stretch to say he's the worst quarterback in the division. I know I sound crazy. I'm not even sold on Jalen Hurts yet, but Daniel Jones, I think he's still a question mark. Ryan Fitzpatrick is so inconsistent, but on a good day, I'm taking him over Daniel Jones 100%. Prescott's a top 10 quarterback. But you have, it was Daniel Jones, Barkley, Galladay, and Evan Ingram. Daniel Jones, the question mark, like I already said. Barkley's a top 10 running back, but he's coming off a season-ending injury with still a shaky offensive line. Galladay is a very underrated receiver, but he's also coming off a season-ending injury. And Evan Ingram has 1 year of his contract left and had 11 drops this past season and has more drops in his career than he has touchdowns. I think the Giants are going to be good, but this hype with like Galladay, like they definitely have one of the better free agencies. But the hype of the Giants, in my opinion, is kind of getting ridiculous. I've seen some people say, they can maybe win the NFC East. I don't see that happening at all. At the absolute best, I could see them being the second best team in the NFC East, and that's still, that's pushing it a little bit.
I still think the NFC East is, if you're not winning that division, you're missing the playoffs. Also, too quick, what up, Darian? I'm just reading the comments. But the way the Giants are being hyped right now is how the Cleveland Browns were hyped 2 years ago. So I'm saying that. Proceed with caution. Look what the Cleveland Browns did this year. They played their cards right. If they do not make the playoffs, though, I think Daniel Jones is out and not Galladay. Gettleman will be fired. It's as simple as that. You already have some GMs and coaches who seats are warm going into this year. It's March, and I'm not afraid to say that. I already can think of a few coaches who potentially could get fired, and I think Dave Gettleman's at the top of the list for GMs because, look, you gave all this money out. Now, if your team does not perform to expectations, you're in trouble because remember, obviously now we look at the Daniel Jones signing is not bad considering Dwayne Haskins was the guy at the time, but that clearly didn't work out in Washington. So I guess it's like little victories, little blessings. But look, the Giants, it's up to you. You got to go play. But I'll say this, and also here's the other thing too: the Giants, the Kyle Rudolph signing may not happen because he failed his physical. His physical's like up in the air. Or he failed it, one of the two. But with the Giants, look, you have to have a great draft. You've got to bring in some great offensive linemen. Rashawn Slater, for example, or even Christian Darrisaw out of Virginia Tech, because I don't think Sewell will be there at 11 unless they want to move up and get him. Sewell's going 5 at the latest. But that's the thing. They got to improve. If that offensive line does not improve, or they also they have to get a nose tackle. They got to replace Dalvin Tomlinson. That's one thing still going out. And also, they got to shore up the linebacking core. I know they got Martinez, but look, having one guy is not going to cut it. But the biggest thing, though, is offensive linemen. And luckily, this is a good offensive line draft coming up.
Yeah, it's going to be really love the hair. Yeah, that's the first time somebody's ever complimented my hair. I have lots of people, say how bad it is. Honestly, I don't even think it's that good. I'm probably going to get a haircut soon, but I appreciate it from Warzone Sports Network. But, I agree there what you said about the Giants. And you mentioned Sewell at 5. And, Elijah Vera Tucker, Sewell, Darrisaw, Slater, all those guys, I would, aside from Sewell, I think could be consideration with the Giants at 11. With Sewell, I've already mentioned I'm a big Bengal fan. If you've seen my show before, I'm a huge Bengal fan. I do not want to put Sewell at 5. I know I sound crazy. We signed Riley Reif to a 1-year deal. Sewell, to me, is really, really talented. But you look at it, it's kind of, I don't know what to compare it to. There was a player several years ago, Mack Wilson. For the Browns, like people on Twitter, Instagram, thought really, really highly, of Mack Wilson. Always want to be maybe a 2nd-round pick. Ended up being a 5th-round pick. I feel like, I don't know, like social media is hyping up Penei Sewell, then that teams and scouts actually think how good Penei Sewell is. Because I saw somebody that had Slater higher than Penei Sewell, which that's questionable. I don't think that's crazy, but if I'm the Bengals, I know, we're talking about Galladay here, getting off topic, but if I'm the Bengals, I'm taking Kyle Pitts at 5. I'm really high on the Kyle Pitts train. His 40-yard dash, 4.46. That is insane for a guy his size. He's not a normal tight end. He's going to be a Travis Kelce or George Kittle. You have Kyle Pitts, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, with Joe Burrow as your quarterback. That is dangerous. And I know we signed Riley Reif, but you cannot really pass up on a playmaker like Kyle Pitts if he's there at 5.
I know. The way I just look at it, though, it's like the Dallas Cowboys from last year. Look, they could have gotten defense. They went with CeeDee Lamb, and obviously we saw how bad their defense was. So the one thing I would suggest, obviously you could get Kyle Pitts once in a lifetime and once in a generation talent is Pitts. But like Darian just said down there, if anything, you're going to get teams that are going to want quarterbacks. Like I bet the Carolina Panthers will be calling, maybe the Denver Broncos, New England Patriots, even now a new one too could be the Chicago Bears at 20. If you want to move back to 20, if you're the Bengals and take Vera Tucker from USC, I think he'll be there. Darisaw may even be there too. I think he'll be probably between 15 to 25. But Slater and Sewell, like someone's going to grab them between the top 15. I just think with Sewell, I also want to be shocked too if the Miami Dolphins snatched him up at 3. But we'll see what happens. It's just you're going to have a mix of teams aggressively trading up to get quarterbacks because obviously there's a lot of teams this year who want a quarterback, but then also too, you may see a team sneak up and try to get Sewell. Like what we saw from Mahomes. I'm only saying that comparison because look, no one saw Kansas City coming at 10 4 years ago.
Yeah, I've said this scenario multiple episodes I've done. I had a separate video just talking about it. This is very unrealistic, but I really believe the best case scenario for the Bengals, and this is very unlikely to happen. Best case scenario for the Bengals is if Zach Wilson would drop to 5, because I really believe the 49ers would offer some crazy deal. The 49ers love Wilson. John Lynch has been to tons of BYU games. The 49er fans like Wilson a ton. I wouldn't be surprised if they swap first-round picks. They give us their first and second next year. But you mentioned the top 20. If the Bengals traded 220 or below 20, I would have on them. You have to get at least swap 2 seconds in the first, because that's the thing. For instance, if Sewell's going at 3, Jamar Chase is going at 4. Pitts, Slater, or Waddle from Darren Harris. I'm taking Pitts because it's kind of a similar situation several years ago when the Bengals drafted Billy Price. The Lions were one spot ahead of the Bengals, and the Bengals were going to take Frank Ragnow, the center from I believe Arkansas. And Ragnow was picked. The Bengals reached and took Billy Price. I really. I kind of talked about, some people have Slater higher than Sewell, but I really don't want to see a situation where they reach for a guy just because, Sewell's gone. I could see a scenario where they trade back, but the bad thing is if you trade back and if you don't get Pitts or something like that, that's when you've messed up really, really badly.
But here's the thing, though. The Bengals have playmakers. It's just now, and you have your franchise quarterback where Joe Burrow is the guy. Obviously, he's coming off the surgery as well in his rookie year, but that's where I'm big on them drafting Sewell because, you need to get him protection, or even if they want to go Rashawn Slater. I'm blanking on who the GM in Cincinnati is, what his name is, but do what your gut tells you to do. Because it's like fantasy, it's like how we think of fantasy football. Obviously, we're not getting paid millions of dollars to do this, but with fantasy football, if there's a guy you have queued up, I'm referring to Yahoo because it's the best. When you go through a Yahoo league and you have someone queued up, you know what you do, and then you're going to pick them and he's taking 2 spots before you, and then you panic and then you take the next available player, and it usually bites you in the ass. It's a similar thing with the Bengals where I feel like I get where you're coming from with that, but at the same time too, I'm saying I'm only throwing out the 20th pick because the Bears hold that, and I feel like the Bears could still be in a position to move up and get a Mac Jones or Trey Lance or Justin Fields. You're probably going to have Denver potentially knocking, which I think they should. Carolina, like I said earlier, even to New England at 15, I think they're prime contenders to move up. And also, too, I wouldn't be shocked if 3, 4, and 5 are moved if they move up, because Miami could still move back in the draft to be fine. Atlanta's just restructured Matt Ryan, so I think they're going to be good unless there's a player they really fall in love with. And you guys, too, just because, if someone's offering you a lot, take the draft capital and run.
Yeah, another thing is possibly Carolina. Matt Rule was really, really high on Trey Lance. Actually, coached him during the Senior Bowl. Wouldn't be surprised if him maybe trade up for Trey Lance. You mentioned Matt Ryan, restructuring his deal. I think the Jets, in my opinion, the Jets, you got to take Zach Wilson. Obviously Lawrence is going to the Jaguars. 3, that's going to be Chase, Sewell, possibly Devontae Smith. Right now, I would say it's more maybe Sewell or Chase. Number 4, I've said for months, I still think Ford will be a quarterback even with Ryan structuring his deal. The 5 would be really interesting if they trade back or not. You mentioned the Patriots at 15 possibly trading up. Let's say there's a scenario at the Patriots trade up. Who would you want them to trade up to get at the quarterback position?
Justin Fields or Trey Lance. Simple answer. That's who they're built. That's who the Patriots are building this offense for right around now. You bring in one of those guys, develop them this year, have them sit a year, have them start in 2022. That's my ideal, best case scenario for this team right now. Look, they brought Cam back. They have Jared Stidham. But if they can move up in the draft in some – because I also think, too, I think 6 quarterbacks are gone before the top 10. I honestly think so. I think Mac Jones will get gone in the top 10. I think Trey Lance is going top 10, Fields, and obviously Wilson and Lawrence. Lawrence and Wilson are 1, 2, and then I think between 3 and 10, you're going to see the other 3 guys, like I said, Fields, Jones, and Lance. They're going to fall. People, because like I said, people want quarterbacks. This is a league where you see a David Tepper. They took a reach on Teddy Bridgewater. Now they have buyer's remorse, so they're scratching for a franchise quarterback. Like David Tepper's very adamant about getting one. I still possibly think that the Carolina Panthers, like I said, the Carolina Panthers could be in a position to trade even too, depending on quarterback situations. But it's something I don't want to get into right now. But we'll see what happens. It's just my ideal scenario for the Patriots right now is, and I saw this too from PFF because of their mock simulator, which I love to use. And also, too, I saw Austin Gale from 2 for 1 Drafts tweet about this. If I'm the Patriots, you call Terry Fontenot, you offer 15, 46, and next year's first round, move up to 4, get Justin Fields, get Trey Lance. We're good.
For the 15, that's a big drop. I would still say the Patriots may need to offer a little bit more, but if you do that, if the Falcons were to accept that, or even if you offer maybe like an extra 3rd or 4th or something like that, that's 100% worth it. Of the 2 between Justin Fields and Trey Lance, I prefer Trey Lance. I think we've already kind of talked about Belichick and the Patriots looking at small school type of prospects, and Trey Lance to me would be a really, really nice fit there. I feel like if Lance played at Ohio State and Alabama, he wouldn't have like first overall consideration, but I think he'd certainly be up there with Zach Wilson. The fact that Trey Lance, I think he reminds me a lot of Deshaun Watson. And if you have a guy remotely close to Deshaun Watson, and if you're playing for Belichick and the Patriots with their weapons, they just recently signed a free agency. That's going to be a massive, massive win and a great move by the Patriots.
But here's the thing, though. If I think Fields is more NFL ready, I think Fields is NFL ready to go. But look, I think both guys will, if they sit for this year, it's not the worst thing in the world. Also, too, I look at Atlanta. So, say for example, if Matt Ryan restructures, they don't have the best year, and then next year they're in a position to get a quarterback. There's a bunch of quarterbacks next year too that are coming out. Guys like Keaton Slovis. We'll see about Rattler. I wouldn't be shocked if he stays back for a senior season and comes out in 23. Even to Bo Nix from Auburn, but we'll see what happens with him this year under a new coaching staff. And the other guy, I'm trying to get his name, Sam Howell from UNC. So I feel like the Falcons, look, they can afford to move back. That's a team, though, I think if they're at 4, I think they're taking Pitts. They need a tight end to go on the other side of Hayden Hurst because they did lose Austin Hooper to Cleveland. If you add, here's the thing, too, with them. You have Julio, you have Calvin Ridley, and you have Ryan restructuring, but if you add in Kyle Pitts in that thing, that's a dangerous offense. But then their defense still is a little shaky. So we'll see what happens. It's just, I think with the restructuring, I think Atlanta wouldn't be too hesitant to move back, especially if the right offer came their way.
Yeah, Pitts to the Falcons. Julio's not what he used to be, but he's still certainly one of the best receivers in the NFL. Ridley's a nice young receiver. Then you have Pitts. If you have Ryan, or if you have a draft quarterback, maybe in later rounds or next year's draft, that's a really nice offense for Atlanta. And we've kind of talked about some of the moves that the Patriots could do, some about the recent move with Kenny Galladay moving to the New York Giants. A little bit of draft talk. There's been lots of good signings so far. There's been lots of bad signings. But who was some good? Who's some of the best free agent signings so far in your opinion?
Besides my team, I'm going to give a very underrated, good winning free agency award to the Cleveland Browns. Andrew Berry made some very good moves to make his team better. John Johnson was a steal from the Los Angeles Rams. There was another Ram that I'm blanking on right now that they got. And they also got Tack McKinley, too, from we were talking before, but from Atlanta on a 1-year, I think $4 million deal, very cheap, to go alongside Myles Garrett. Because I was saying that Myles Garrett needs a Robin. He's obviously Batman, one of the best defensive edge players in the league. He's ferocious and can get out the quarterback. You saw him playing basketball. That guy's got pythons for arms. I honestly think Cleveland has a very good chance to make a run this year and make a lot of noise in the AFC. Cleveland's a team that I like. But all in all, with free agency, one signing that I liked was Carl Lawson to the New York Jets. I'm a Patriots fan, so saying that sounds kind of weird, but you know what? The Jets have not had a very good edge rusher since John Abraham. That was in the 2000s. And even they had Muhammad Wilkerson a few years ago, but he's an interior guy. But if I had to give best award, it simply is I have to say Carl Lawson to the New York Jets.
Yeah, I was hoping
Patriot award, by the way.
I was hoping we would re-sign Carl Lawson. Obviously we didn't. We signed Trey Hendrickson. I prefer Lawson over Hendrickson. Lawson, he did not get a ton of sacks this past season, but he had tons of quarterback pressures. There's so many good signings. One specifically, Corey Linsley. I think that's one of the most underrated signings in the league. I think that's definitely a top 10 best signing. Signing with the Chargers. Linsley was rated the best center and one of the best offensive linemen in Germany, according to Pro Football Focus this past season, playing with the Green Bay Packers. He goes to the Chargers in a 5-year deal where, he's going to be the center, with Justin Herbert with the Chargers. And last season, the Chargers were rated the worst offensive line in the league, according to Pro Football Focus. And the year prior, they were ranked 30th in the league. Also, I believe the Chargers did not have a single player on the offensive line to have a PFF rating of 67 or better. I think Linsley had over 90%. The Chargers do not want Herbert to go through a similar situation that happened to Joe Burrow. Signing that top offensive lineman Linsley, to me, that is definitely one of the most underrated and one of the best free agent signings so far.
Yeah, you know what? They also added Pfeiffer from Pittsburgh. The Chargers had to do what they had to do to get better. Simply put, you're right. Tom Telesco had a great free agency. The Chargers are going to be another team that they're going to be very exciting to watch. Like I said, though, I think they're still on that bubble of they can either be a wild card team or they're just on the outside looking in for 2021.
Another signing I like. I do mock drafts about every Monday. I try to, and every single mock draft, for the most part, I've had the Broncos take a corner. And with Kyler Fuller recently being released by the Bears, the Broncos signing Fuller to a 1-year deal, I think around $9-10 million, pairing him back with Vic Fangio. When Fangio was with the Bears, he was an All-Pro, had 7 interceptions. Fuller's one of the better corners in the league, and they lost Chris Harris last season, free agency. They also released AJ Boye. I think that's a team need. You address the team need there. He was one of the best players available. I know it's a 1-year deal. It's kind of a prove it deal, but for $9.5 million compared to what William Jackson got for 14 with the Washington football team, that was a steal. And that was every single scenario, like best player, one of the best players, team need, great contract. That's a plus signing to me.
Here's the thing, though, with the Denver Broncos. They're going to be one of those teams. They're going to have a great defense. I still do not trust Drew Lock. I do not trust him at all. I don't think he's the guy. That's the thing with Denver. Denver's got to get a quarterback in this year's draft. And, Denver can still win, but I still think Drew Lock's inconsistencies are going to bite that team in the ass. I also think, too, I like Vic Fangio, great defensive-minded coach. You need offense to win in this league. I don't think a defensive coach is going to win you a championship or even get you close to getting to the playoffs. So I still think this year it's just not going to go right, and that they're reevaluating in 2022 if they don't play their cards right in 21, and if they don't do anything to improve. I think Fangio's on his way out. Another signing I want to talk about quickly is I don't love the Von Miller option just because you don't know what you're getting. Obviously, he's a Bronco Hall of Famer, had the great play in Super Bowl 50, Super Bowl MVP. But if they had let him walk, it would open up a lot of cap room to bring in somebody else who's cheaper. That's all.
Yeah, you mentioned Drew Lock, and did I ever tell you who I had as my MVP this past season?
No.
It was Drew Lock. I know that was absolutely crazy, a really stupid prediction, but honestly, I thought Lock was going to have a great season for the Broncos. He was injured some. They had lots of injuries with the Broncos. Courtland Sutton was out for the year. But Drew Lock was, I believe, he was 4-1 his rookie season, and I thought he was going to be really good. And I still think he might, but it's also that huge question mark with Drew Lock, and also like we talked about, Jones as well. And you mentioned Von Miller, and change topics here for a second. Von Miller to me, and maybe even Bradley Chubb. Bradley Chubb, it would possibly be a part of this trade. I know we talked about before about Deshaun Watson. I've mentioned Washington a couple of times. Looking more into it, I think the perfect destination for Deshaun Watson is the Denver Broncos. He would trade like 3 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and let's say Bradley Chubb or Von Miller. And I know that's a ton, but with the allegations with Deshaun Watson, right now, all the different things going on, that trade, that's going to, they're going to trade him for less. People are not going to want to trade as much for a guy who could, be in some serious trouble. But Drew Lock, whoever trades for Deshaun Watson will 100% trade their starting quarterback. And Drew Lock still has 2 years on his deal. Bradley Chubb has 1 year left, not including his potential 5th-year option. And, you put Deshaun Watson on that Broncos team, they're 100% a Super Bowl contender. Deshaun Watson, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, they have so many nice guys. And, we've already talked about their defense being really nice. If Watson would end up going to Denver, which I don't think it's likely, because the Texans have been outspoken about they have no intention to trade Deshaun Watson. I think Watson to Denver to make them immediate Super Bowl contenders.
If it were to happen, it would be great. I'd rather not talk about the situation right now just because I do not think he's getting traded until all these allegations are done with. It's not in my business to talk about it. We don't know much about it. Obviously, there's more information that keeps coming out daily, so I honestly think the trade is off the table, especially more now. So ever since these allegations came to be afoot last week, and I just don't want to comment on it further just because, look, I don't want to say the wrong thing and get myself in trouble. And also, too, like I said, I'm just going to let the legal system play itself out and wait and see what happens. And then after that, we can more or less focus on potential destinations for Watson if he were to get traded by the Texans. But I just think if they were to go and trade him right now, it would just look horrible on the organization as a whole and kind of show their true colors for who they really are. But I think for now, the talks of it have gone away, and for right now, we're just trying to get to the bottom of exactly what happened with all these women in Houston, and you just hope for the best.
Yeah, if they were to trade him right now, that would, they've talked about, they have no intentions, and then allegations come up, and then they trade him. That really would, show like how crappy of a franchise they have. But before we enter the Deshaun Watson topic, hopefully those things are not true, and if they were, Watson should get into serious trouble. He deserves the punishment that he gets if this were to be true. One thing, though, to me. I'm not saying, they didn't happen and they did. I'm just saying they did not happen. And if people made up those allegations, the people who made up those allegations, if they aren't true, I think they should get in trouble because, we saw this years ago. Sean Oakman, I believe was his name, from Baylor. That was kind of a similar situation. There was a serious accusation was made for Sean Oakman. And he ended up, was in some trouble and ended up not being drafted. And it turns out, a year or so, it was announced that none of those allegations, were even true. Basically ruined the guy's career, not being drafted. And hopefully these things are from Deshaun Watson aren't true. But if they aren't, I think the people who have talked about these should be in some serious trouble.
You know what? I'm just going to let the justice system play out and do its part. I have no business in this. I have no business talking about it. I'm just going to stay tight-lipped about it for now. And I don't really have any thoughts or opinions on this, too, just because I'm not a legal expert or anything. I'm just a guy with a microphone who likes to talk football. So I'm just going to keep my mouth. I'm just going to stay silent about this until we find out more or until the legal process is over with.
So, we were talking about some best free agent signings. Recently we talked about, the Broncos, what they could possibly do, and some, other teams, with Broncos getting Fuller and some other really nice signings like Lindsley to the Chargers. But who are some of the worst free agent signings in your opinion?
I'm going to say Trey Hendrickson, and I know it may piss you off a bit, but look, The fact that the Saints just let him go is a big red flag. The fact that they didn't even offer him or try to offer him, they kind of just said, okay, bye, like, you can go. I think says a lot. I think last year, too, he was great, but this year, if he doesn't have games where he gets sacks, it's going to look really bad, and it's going to be like, okay, what did we pay for? The other thing, too, with the signing is that, look, he was great with New Orleans, but you also got to look who was on the other side of him. It was Cam Jordan, who was a great defensive edge, who also, too, was doing his part getting sacks, doing his stacking them up. But you also too had guys like Demario Davis. So if there's guys on that Cincinnati defense who cannot bail him out, it's going to look bad. That's just one that I had to say because that's one that came to the top of my mind right away. Just trying to think of anybody else. I'm going to say too, Miami getting Max Skura. Max Skura is a center who I'm not really a big fan of. I saw mightily he struggled this year with snapping and also to his ball control. I saw it especially in the Patriots game when it was pouring rain and he couldn't snap properly the entire game. So I'm going to say those two. I'm going to say Miami getting Skura just because I don't think Miami did really anything to get better. I know they added Will Fuller, but you're only getting 15 or maybe 16 games out of him. We'll know about that more next week with the annual league meetings taking place. But, yeah, if I had to pick two, I'd say Trey Hendrickson to Cincinnati and Max Skura to Miami.
Yeah, you mentioned Trey Hendrickson. I honestly do not like the move nearly as most Bengal fans do. Had 13.5 sacks this past season with the New Orleans Saints, but the 3 years prior, he only had 6.5. Trey Hendrickson is more so a sack guy. You mentioned Carl Lawson, how it was one of your favorite signings. Carl Lawson does get you sacks, but a lot of Lawson's work is also getting quarterback pressures. Hendrickson does not get quarterback pressures like Lawson. Hendrickson, it is a questionable signing. 4 years for $60 million. I don't understand why you just wouldn't re-sign Carl Lawson. I do think the guaranteed money had a little bit to do with it, but I still wish they would have re-signed Lawson. Hendrickson, to me, though, you mentioned also with New Orleans defense. When your defense is good, when you have a guy like Cameron Jordan on the other side, it's going to be more easy for you to get sacks. With Lawson, on our other side, it's Sam Hubbard. He was hurt some this past season, and he's honestly he's a guy who doesn't even get a lot of sacks. He's more he's better at defending the run. And with Lawson, he didn't have that other guy on the side, so there was times they maybe even double team Carl Lawson instead. Because Trey Hendrickson, you're not going to double your team because you have guys like Cameron Jordan, so many great defenders on that New Orleans defense. Another signing I absolutely hate is Andy Dalton to the Bears. Like, that makes no sense. 1 year, $10 million. Last season, I thought it would have made quite a bit of sense instead of trading for Nick Foles. If I'm the Bears last season, I wanted the Bears to sign Andy Dalton instead of trading for Foles. But now you have Dalton and Foles. You can make a case. Neither one of these quarterbacks are better than Mitchell Trubisky. And Trubisky, he's inconsistent. But Bengal fan, and for seeing for nearly a decade how inconsistent Andy Dalton is, the fact that the Chicago Bears think this is an upgrade over Trubisky or Nick Foles is very crazy. Andy Dalton is not going to elevate your team. He's a game manager at the absolute best. Take away 2015, Andy Dalton might not even be playing in the league anymore. He had an MVP season up until he got hurt, but you have Allen Robinson, one of the best receivers in the league, one of the more underrated ones. But if you're not having that good quarterback to throw to him, it's not going to matter who your wide receiver is or who you have on the offense side of the ball. They're basically just relying on their defense like they had the past several seasons for Chicago with that Dalton signing. I don't see the Bears being any better than last season. I'd be shocked if the Bears even finished 500 this season.
We'll see with the Bears what they do. Obviously, they still have the draft to add. There's a lot of quarterbacks they can get day 2 or day 3. They can go out and get Felipe Franks, Kellen Mond, Jamie Newman. They're not done. It's just, look, the signing's not exactly what you look at as the best case scenario. It was them getting desperate and signing the next available guy. If I were to say another one quickly, it's Adoree Jackson. It's just because of the money. It's the money that has to do it with Adoree Jackson. Like Big Holiday, I like the signing for the money because, look, he's a great receiver. But with Adoree Jackson, that's a very risky signing considering, too, he was on and off the field last year.
Yeah, one more signing. I mentioned Corey Davis earlier in the show. I don't really like that signing much. 3 years for $37 million. Corey Davis is all right, but me, like, I just think it's a little bit overpriced for a guy who's not really had a great season. He's had a couple, decent good seasons, but I wouldn't consider, signing Corey Davis for 3 years for $37 million. I absolutely hate him. He's the player I hate the most in the league. Juju Smith, to me, going to the Jets made so much sense. I mean, I know it's very, very unlikely that Sam Darnold is a starting quarterback for the Jets week 1, but it did play together in college. Juju Smith going to New York, I mean, you'd think, he would love that media attention that he gets all the time. If he gets this much in Pittsburgh, I cannot imagine what it'd be like in New York. I really thought maybe Juju Smith for like 3 years, 42, 45, something like that. I think he's better than Corey Davis, but by the time you look at the contracts, Corey Davis is getting more money than Juju Smith. He signed a 1-year contract with the Steelers, but I feel like the Jets would have been better off signing maybe Juju Smith for a similar price, or maybe signing some other receivers who are just a tad bit better than Corey Davis.
I didn't mind the Corey Davis signing because he's a Robert Saleh guy. He's a guy who he's going to go in there, he's going to put his head down, he's going to work hard. The money may be a little bit much, but for a team morale thing, I think Corey Davis helps that receiver room. It can help too with the development of Denzel Mims, because I think Mims eventually they want to have as their wide receiver 1 in a few years. Corey Davis, I think, is just like I said. You're going to see this more for coming forward with the Jets. You're going to see guys going there because of Saleh. It's as simple as that. Now with Juju. Look, he wanted to get paid. He realized that he wasn't going to get paid anywhere else, so I think that's why he went to Pittsburgh. I don't mind the signing for the Steelers just because it is low risk. It is 1 year. It's only $8 million. So worst case scenario, if he either acts like a jackass continually again, or if he just doesn't perform on field, he can leave next year. Because, look, that's the thing with the receiver market now. It's going down because they know how many great receivers are coming out of the draft. Look at this year. This year obviously won't be the same as last year, but this year too, you have some great receivers coming out. So if Pittsburgh wants to, they can go and draft a guy like Amon St. Brown, a Kadarius Toney, Amari Rodgers, for example, Tyler Darden from I think it's Tyler Darden and something like that from North Texas. There's a lot of receivers in the draft this year, and even next year too. There's going to be guys there. So GMs are starting to get wise to, hey, look, if I have a receiver problem, you don't have to overpay in free agency. Just wait another month and get someone in the draft.
Talking about the worst free agent signings, we're going to teams who have gotten better. To me, we talked about the Steelers. Their only signing was basically Juju Smith, and to me, some of the teams who I think had the best free agency so far. I like the Giants, but not for the money. I like the Adoree Jackson signing, but I agree with you. I do think it's a little bit much. I like the Kenny Golladay signing. I think it's better than people think. Because by the time it's over with, I think that's going to be considered cheap in the NFL because prices are only going to go up. But they signed some of their own guys again. Personally, I think the Giants. I talked about them, being a little bit overrated, but I'm not going to discredit. They had a very, very nice free agency. I also like the Jacksonville Jaguars. I like the Carlos Hyde signing. I thought that's pretty underrated.
I'm not sure what happened, folks. I'm going to take it from here. For obviously, I'm going to say the Patriots had a great free agency just because, and I'm also going to say this too. The Jacksonville Jaguars, look, I know they didn't make a lot of splash signings, but they made a lot of signings that made a lot of sense, and they made a lot of signings, too, that I think potentially can make their football team better in the future. Adding Marvin Jones and stuff like that, look, you give Trevor Lawrence something to
looks like there's some technical difficulties. Try to get him back in a second here. But I really like the Jaguars with Carlos Hyde. It was a 1-year deal. I also like Marvin Jones. I thought it was a pretty nice deal. $7 million for 2 years. He's a very proven wide receiver. So I think that's really, really nice for Jacksonville.
Yeah, exactly. It's like what I was saying before. I like the Marvin Jones thing. I like the, like I said, I'm going to say New England just because the New York Jets are a team I think they got better throughout the free agency as well. Also adding in Keelan Cole as well and Sheldon Rank. A couple signings just to hone in on. But if I had to say teams who have gotten better, I'm going to go ultimately with New England. and the Los Angeles Chargers. Even though I did pump the tires a little bit for the Jags and the Jets, I still think they didn't fully spend this offseason because I think it's going to be next year. I think they're going to have like a growing – both of them are going to have years where it's kind of like 6 and 10, I think 7 and 9 is their ceilings, so that they can look at it like – basically I think both teams are going to be next year where the Patriots are this year, and then they can go out and spend and make all those splashes because if you want to know who's a free agent in 2022 to look out for already, Devontae Adams is up next year. Just throwing it out there right now.
Yeah, the Patriots also had a really nice free agency as well. Can you hear me all right?
I got you.
All right. I wasn't sure for a second because I know you were lagging, and I was lagging there for a second. But, the Patriots, I mean, they had a phenomenal free agency. Teams have gotten worse. To me, not just saying this because they're in my division, 100% the Steelers and the Ravens. The Ravens have not signed anybody. Not the Ravens. And they did sign Kevin Zeitler, but aside from that, they did lose Matthew Judon. But Zeitler was a really, really nice signing. But I wish, the Ravens maybe give some more weapons, maybe to Lamar Jackson, or maybe get some more guys on the defensive side of the ball. But to me, I would definitely say it's the Steelers because you signed Juju Smith for 1 year, $8 million, which is a really nice contract, but it's a prove-it deal. So he could possibly leave next season. But for that move to happen, you had to release your starting corner, Steven Nelson. I mean, you're not going to be able to do, much more moves there for the Pittsburgh because they don't have much money. Also, one other team I think got a little bit worse was the Green Bay Packers. They're kind of surprising people by re-signing Aaron Jones. I honestly did not think Aaron Jones would re-sign with the Packers. I thought he would have went to the Miami Dolphins. But they have yet to sign a wide receiver for Aaron Rodgers, and you lost Corey Lindsey, who was the best center in football last season, one of the best offensive linemen in the league. I mean, when you re-signed your own guy, but you lost one of the best offensive linemen, and you have yet to give Aaron Rodgers a weapon.
Yeah, another team for free agency winners quickly is the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, I didn't like seeing him leaving, but adding Joe Thuney and Kyle Long, and look, their offensive line's got a lot better in Kansas City. So we all saw, look, that's a thing they needed to improve on in free agency after the Super Bowl. For teams who got worse, I'll say Pittsburgh as well, but also for the fact, too, that they lost Pouncey to retirement. Alejandro Villanueva more than likely will not be coming back. He's a free agent. So you look at Pittsburgh, it's kind of like, okay, you got all this stuff thrown together. Green Bay, I'm not saying yet because, look, they still got number 12. As long as they have Aaron Rodgers under center, they're going to be a good football team. It's like the Patriots with Tom Brady. Look, as long as you got Aaron Rodgers, as long as you got those kind of guys, you're going to be good. That's all. Other teams who I could say would have lost free agency, I honestly think partially the Miami Dolphins, just because they didn't do any splash moves to get better. They got Will Fuller, but injuries, and he has the PED suspension, so we'll see. And like I said, he may still play 16 games. That still remains. Hopefully they add in an extra game this year. We'll find out soon, but more than likely it will be happening. It's just kind of like they're keeping it hush for now. But I'm not going to – actually, Miami, I'm not going to say for losing, but Miami didn't do good. Baltimore, too. Another loss they had was Yannick Ngakoue, who went to the Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, Ngakoue, that was another guy. Matthew Judon, losing him to the Patriots, their defense is not going to be nearly as good. And, we talked about the Browns early in the episode. You were really high on them.
Yep.
I really believe, in the AFC North this season, the Browns are going to win the AFC North, and the Steelers are going to be last in the AFC North. I mean, I don't see what the Steelers, they have no improvements. Pouncey and the Roethlisberger connection, they've been there for nearly a decade. That's not going to – I mean, that's a big loss. That's a much bigger loss than people expect. They also lost their starting corner. They've not gained anybody at all. The Browns, phenomenal free agency, had a great season. I think Baltimore would be really, really good, but not quite as good. And I think the Bengals will have a better season than, I would say, a 7-9, maybe something like that. But I would not be surprised at all. As of right now, I know the free agency is not done yet. The draft hasn't even happened yet. But as of now, I really think the Cleveland Browns can maybe end up winning the AFC North, and the Steelers would be last in the AFC North.
The North still to be seen. It's just when it comes to defenses, though, the Steelers still have one of the best defenses in that division. It's just to be remained to see how well Ben can play with a new center, a new offensive coordinator. I believe Matt Canada will be running the offense as Randy Fichtner was fired after the year. But we'll see with the North. But if I had to put money on it right now, Cleveland's the team to beat. It's hands down Cleveland's the team to beat. And then I think the Ravens and the Steelers are in that wild card / miss the playoffs mix.
Yeah, it'll be interesting with the AFC North. And with all of these signings, I mean, there are so many signings happening this past week. Jonnu Smith, Henry, Kenny Galladay, so many more other top players. And there's still some really nice players to sign somewhere. We have the draft coming up next month. It just seems crazy to think about. This to me, it seems like one of the fastest off seasons ever. There's so much football, signings and the draft and everything. And in this episode, we kind of talked about the best free agent signings and the worst. Teams who have gotten better and teams who have gotten worse throughout so far in free agency. So, Griffin, can you tell some listeners to follow you on social media?
Not sure what's going on here, folks. For me, he's frozen. I'm still here. Look, the NFL is off. That's why I like talking about the NFL. The NFL is the one sport where it's 12 months a year. It's as simple as that. NFL's 12 months a year. We'll see what happens. I still think you're going to see some stuff. We saw pro days today. Alabama's pro day happened. Mac Jones looked pretty good. Rondale Moore was a really good standout at Purdue. He's 5'7", but he had like a I'm back. I'm not sure what's happening. I'm not sure if it's you or not, but it's no big deal.
All right, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this video and subscribe to the channel, I will put all the links and Griffin's social media below. If you could like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. And I will see you next time on the Sports 2 Hunt Show.